What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the reveal of the number 13 team in my 2019 NFL Power Rankings, a deep dive into the Dallas Cowboys. Now, this is a team that obviously garners a lot of national attention. You're all pretty familiar with this team, and here at 13, for me, the question's not, can this team get into the playoffs? To me, this is shit or get off the pot season for Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys here. Not can they make the playoffs. We've seen what this defense can do. We've seen this offense have success on and off for the last few years. What it is to me is, can this team put it all together and win a Super Bowl here before they have to pay Dak Prescott, which, spoiler alert, in my opinion, is going to really hinder this team. So as we go here, if you learn something, if you enjoy, please do hit that like button. It's the easiest way to support this channel and share the video. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any more deep dive uploads as we continue on into the top teams here. Turn on notifications so you don't miss an upload. Also, if you want to support the channel, if you're shopping for tickets this summer, use promo code ThatFranchiseGuy on SeatGeek. You're going to get the best prices there anyway, so you might as well save $20 on your first purchase and support this channel while you're at it. If you're new to the series, what we do is we go through the roster, we rank each position, how they stack up against the rest of the league. While we do that, you will be looking at my own custom Madden roster. So while that is a video game, these are my own ratings and they accurately show how I perceive each player. After that, we'll go through the schedule. We'll talk game by game, talk about this team's Vegas over-under expectations, and then after that, we will really talk about kind of the Super Bowl and if this team can get it all done. So last year was a good season for this Cowboys team. You could call it a surprise season if you want. They go into the playoffs, they win their division. Ultimately, they fall short against the Rams. But as we kind of mentioned here, this is really shaping up to be the Cowboys' big season in terms of their winning window here. They really hit on the late round quarterback with Dak Prescott. He's on a super cheap contract. And then you have really a bunch of star players still intact here. And unfortunately, they have a lot of contracts coming up, and we're going to kind of break down who the key pieces are here, who they should keep, who they might consider letting go, but more importantly, who on this roster can step up and really elevate this team to that Super Bowl level. Because obviously at 13 here, we're going to have this team in the conversation for the playoffs in the NFC. So we're going to start off talking about Dak Prescott here, who is going to come in tied for 21st for me. And I think there's this kind of belief that I hate Dak Prescott. And maybe that comes from the viewers that I've had going back to his rookie season, where I said, let's pump the brakes here. Everything was kind of perfect there as a rookie. He still kind of clearly lacks that elite arm talent to use the entire field and get himself into that top 10 elite conversation, and that's all really stayed put since then. So, while the public perception of Dak Prescott has gone from he's the next Tom Brady to, he's just Andy Dalton, for me, it's all kind of hovered around the same thing. To me, Dak Prescott is what he is. And as we kind of hinted at in the intro, paying Dak Prescott over $30 million, which this team effectively has no choice to do, is going to put this team in a tough spot. And, I'm sitting here from my armchair, I can't really say that that's the wrong thing to do, to pay Dak Prescott. Losing him would set this organization back 3 or 4 years, if not a whole decade, as we've seen with some teams that just can't find any sort of semblance of a starting caliber quarterback. They at least have that in Dak Prescott. But at the same time, as we've seen with contracts like Derek Carr, Joe Flacco, I would argue Matt Ryan, when you pay that quarterback that much money, it's not that you can't win a Super Bowl, but he has to be that elite quarterback that can not just create offense when it's not there, but elevate the play of those around him. And I don't know how much Dak Prescott is really going to be doing that. He's kind of a purgatory starter. It's not that he shouldn't be starting in the NFL, and it's certainly not that you can't win a Super Bowl with that type of player. But on that contract, especially in those first couple of years when he's one of the 5 to 10 biggest cap hits among quarterbacks, it is going to be very difficult, especially because it's likely going to cost this team a Byron Jones or a Jalen Smith or even Ezekiel Elliott. It's just a tough go here after this season. But at the same time, I don't think that this season is going to be made or broken on the heels of Dak Prescott. I think it really does hinge on the rest of this roster that we're going to have a fun time going through here. You know, Dak, he's fine for me. He's tied for 21st. He's a mobile guy. He can elude rushes, create first downs with his legs. He's, pretty precise in the short game. His accuracy leaves a little bit to be desired. It's not bad by any means, and his arm talent is just kind of average. And his deep balls, he's just never really going to open up the entire field the way you want from, an elite quarterback. So behind him, you got Cooper Rush, Mike White, a 5th-round pick last year. The season's done if Dak Prescott gets hurt. They don't have a Nick Foles or a Teddy Bridgewater here, which I would argue they should have gone after because, like we said, this is it for this team, in my opinion. It's going to be a really hard time putting together a roster the caliber of this one after this season with all these contracts looming. So let's move on and talk about the running back here. Ezekiel Elliott going to come in third. You could certainly make a debate for him as the second best running back in the NFL. We'll see what Le'Veon Bell looks like. To me, Saquon is the best running back in the NFL, but Zeke not that far behind. You do have some off-the-field questions with him. He'll probably be fine. I'm not really worried about it, but it does feel like at any point Zeke could get in a fight at a bar or, harass a girl in an Uber. It's just he's that kind of player. You don't really trust him once he leaves the building. So you do kind of have questions about that. He should be ready to go, and he's going to be a stud this year. And he is one of the 4 or 5 running backs in this league, maybe 6 or 7 as we've gotten some more depth at the position. But, he really does make an impact on the game because he's a true 3-down back. How often do we talk about the importance of that? When Zeke's on the field, he's not Jordan Howard. He's not Leonard Fournette. You have to, kind of play on your heels because he can catch screen games. He can slip out of the backfield on checkdowns, but he can also just maul you between the trenches. He's a great outside zone runner. He really is a do-it-all back, which does bring you some added value as opposed to a running back that maybe is a little bit more one-dimensional. So you love what you have in Zeke. When he's healthy, he's going to help out this offense. And then behind him, they drafted 2 guys this year, which I thought was really smart because they kind of need to, in my opinion, lighten the load on Zeke. Especially if this team's going to be in the playoffs, you're going to want Ezekiel Elliott healthy. So they draft Tony Pollard in the 4th round, then they grab Mike Weber in the 7th round. These guys are kind of that 1-2 punch, in my opinion, and it's kind of pointless to debate who's going to win the number 2 job. It's going to be a situational thing. I like both these players, had mid-round, day 3 grades on both of them. Mike Weber, more of the power back. Tony Pollard played more of a 3rd down back role there at Memphis behind Darrell Henderson, a little better of a receiver. As long as Zeke's healthy, they're going to play situational reps. You're going to see Weber in short yardage, more rundowns. You'll see Pollard as more of a receiving back. If anything happened to Zeke, I think they would rotate these 2 situationally. But I think they added some very necessary depth to that running back room. And then they also have Darius Jackson, kind of a freak athlete who's never really been able to figure it out. So not much to talk about there. So 3rd at running back, obviously the run game and the defense going to be a pretty significant identity for this team. And then you've got the wide receivers here. They actually come in tied for 9th, which is going to sound a little high to some people. I'm a big Amari Cooper believer. His numbers have never really supported him as a top 10 wide receiver, but the guy is an uber athlete. He's a fantastic route runner. He is in the top 3 in terms of foot quickness and release, and he pairs perfectly with Dak Prescott in the short to intermediate passing game that is Dak Prescott's strength. I don't know if Oakland tried to use him too much as a deep threat or what it really was, but this thing was just a match made in heaven here in Dallas, and they really learned how to use him effectively from the get-go, and trading a first-round pick for him turned out to be a fantastic trade. Poor Raiders fans. They traded, in all effectiveness, their 2 best players to teams that they thought they were going to be getting top 10 picks from, and both those teams went on to be 2 of the best teams in the NFL. But for Dallas, Amari Cooper, despite the fact that you're going to have to pay him a ton of money and he is going to create some cap issues here, he is going to be worth it for this team. And I don't think it's a coincidence that this team went on to be a much better team on offense with Amari Cooper. And then they bring in Randall Cobb to be the slot guy here. It's hard to expect him to stay healthy the entire season. You do lose Cole Beasley. It is a downgrade in the slot. Luckily you can rely on Amari Cooper for that short to intermediate passing game. You get Jason Witten back to move those sticks a little bit. Randall Cobb's a very good slot receiver when he's on the field, but tremendous health question marks. Really hard to expect him to play 16 games. And then you have Michael Gallup, third-round pick last year. Love this player. I think he is going to continue to take more and more reps from Allen Hurns and emerge as the number 2 wide receiver here next to Amari Cooper. I love Michael Gallup's upside. I don't know if this year is going to be the year he really breaks out, or if he really ever will break out in terms of, having Pro Bowl numbers or whatever you want to talk about from a production standpoint. But I do think as a player, he is a very reliable number 2 wide receiver down the road. And then you do still have Allen Hurns there. You could do a lot worse as a 4th wide receiver. You got a ton of depth here in this wide receiver room. You also got Cedric Wilson, a 6th-round pick last year. I thought that was an excellent pick. There was a lot of late-round wide receivers in last year's draft that went a lot later than I thought they would. I had a 3rd-round grade on Cedric Wilson. They got him in the 6th. He ended up getting an injury and missing the entire season. So keep an eye on him to compete here. He's going to have a hard time making this roster, though, because you also got Noah Brown, big physical wide receiver who had a really bad playoff game against Seattle, but he did show some things towards the end of last year. They've been slowly developing him to be that Dez Bryant replacement as that big-bodied wide receiver. Would like to see some more consistency and physicality from him as a player. But then you got Tavon Austin, the kick returner. He's going to make this team. So they probably keep all 7 of those guys, and then they have like 6 more guys in here as camp bodies, but I just don't see how they take any of those guys we just mentioned off the team for one of these other guys. And then at tight end, I'm going to catch a lot of flack for this from Cowboys fans, but I'm just going to say it. Jason Witten's one of the most overrated players in the history of the NFL. He's fine. He's okay as a blocker. He's not a vertical threat. He's not a great athlete. He's not any kind of mismatch problem. He's a steady pair of hands on 3rd down. That's all he is. Seriously. He's not some Hall of Fame player. He's not some top 10 all-time tight end. He's fine. I kind of have an issue with him coming back out of retirement, though, in my opinion. You had already kind of set this in motion for Dalton Schultz to be that 3rd down chain mover, average blocker, just like Jason Witten. You got Blake Jarwin, who's played here. I don't expect anything from Rico Gathers. But for Dak Prescott, who I think is going to need to lean on that tight end position a little more, I would have much preferred them to draft a tight end in a very good tight end class. Or I don't know. It just, to me, it seems like it's going to set this team back a little bit at tight end. I do not expect much from Jason Witten coming out of retirement, coming from the booth to the field. Like, he'll be a good on-field coach, don't get me wrong, and he'll help a guy like Dalton Schultz, who my NFL comparison for coming out of college was Jason Witten. He'll help him turn into that, but he's also going to take away those reps from Dalton Schultz to develop now. So, I don't know. It's fine. He does not move the needle for me in any way. But tied for 9th at wide receiver. A lot of that's Amari Cooper. Most of it's just the overall depth at the wide receiver position. So Dak's going to have a bunch of good weapons here. The run game should be cooking with Zeke. And then the offensive line tied for 7th here. And, a couple years ago, this was the clear-cut best line in the NFL. You can still make the argument for 3 of the best players at their own position, but you're starting to develop some question marks here with Tyron Smith and Travis Frederick. Smith has just not been that number 1 tackle in the NFL for the last couple years. He has been banged up left and right. When healthy, you probably would take him over David Bakhtiari as the best tackle in the NFL, and he still is ridiculous, like pulling in space. Like, he just makes the best looking blocks you've ever seen. And I'm not trying to rip Tyron Smith. He's a stud. And then you've got Travis Frederick, who did not play last year. And getting him back is a huge reason to be optimistic here and to get this run game going to what it was with Zeke. And, I'm sure that any Cowboys fans that tells me I'm low on this team is going to say that you get Travis Frederick back and this offensive line is going to look like it did in, 2015 when Zeke was a borderline MVP. And, maybe that happens. You got Connor Williams at left guard. He's going to be competing with Connor McGovern, a 3rd-round pick. Those guys are a little more raw prospects. It's not what you had in Ronald Leary. Lyle Collins at right tackle. He's had his ups and downs. He played pretty good last year, but he's not dug free from that year. So, your weaker links are a little weaker than they were that year in 2015, but also Tyron Smith, not the player he was at the time. Not that he's bad now, but he was just freaking dominant, like absolute tier 1, like all-time great that year. And then Travis Frederick, we don't know exactly what he's going to look like. So the offensive line, don't get me wrong, is great, tied for 7th. And this is a big reason why I say it's shit or get off the pot year, because we just went through this entire offense and they don't have any gaping holes. They've got a lot of depth. They've got a ton of weapons. They've got a great offensive line. There's no excuses for this offense to not be better than it was last year. So I do rank them 15th. Certainly have the upside of a top 10 offense, but you do got some things holding them back a little bit. The Dak Prescott factor, the fact that he doesn't use the entire field. This team might rely on some screen games, some quick hitting passes, the run game. It's not a bad thing, but to get into that top 10, I would say you do have to use the entire field and really open things up. You also have a new offensive coordinator here, Kellen Moore, first-time role as an offensive coordinator. We'll see how he plays out. There's a lot of upside there in the young, exciting offensive coordinator, but there's also a lot of downside there. So we'll see how he is as a play caller here. But I will say that, this offense last year was not what they wanted it to be. And getting Travis Frederick back, having a full year with Amari Cooper, you really do have some optimism here that this can be a top 10 offense. And as we transition to Rod Marinelli's defense here, it does get scary if they can have a top 10 offense. And if that does happen, I will be wrong. And this team will exceed this ranking of 13th. Because we saw a top 5 borderline elite defense last year. Actually, screw that. This was an elite defense in the last, 6 weeks of last season. And you've got the run defense here. We don't put a lot of priority in it. They were not the best run defense last year. They ranked tied for 24th. We don't spend a whole lot of time talking about run defense. Just like we saw them play against the Seahawks in the playoffs. Like, they were able to stop the run even though they don't have premium run defenders here. You got Antoine Woods, you've got Tyron Crawford, who's going to play a little edge, play a little inside. They had a good signing in Christian Covington, Daniel Ross. They've got some good interior run defenders. DeMarcus Lawrence is excellent on the edge against the run, and then these linebackers really help out against the run as well. So, everyone has really been making a case that I'm too low on their run defense. Well, that's because everyone watches their team, and every team has 10 games a year where they just shut down the run. Welcome to the NFL. That's why we don't put a lot of weight in run defense. Everyone can basically do it. So let's move on and talk about the much more important pass rush here that is going to come in 9th. So you love what you have in DeMarcus Lawrence. I could be jumping the gun on this take here, but he's kind of in his own tier because you got Von Miller and Khalil Mack on the edge. You could throw J.J. Watt maybe in there if you consider him an edge or an IDL. But DeMarcus Lawrence is definitely a tier above whatever the next tier is. Like, he is a lot better than Frank Clark or D. Ford, who are getting paid about as much as DeMarcus Lawrence. And he's just an absolute monster. Really broke out in 2017, was actually the player I would have voted for Defensive Player of the Year. And after being a little on and off for the start of his career, they weren't sure if he was worth that big money. Well, he returned dividends the next season, was playing on the tag, and was just dominant again. So you love what you have in DeMarcus Lawrence. It's the number one reason this is a top 10 pass rush for me, and he was a big reason this defense was as good as it was last year. And then they also add Robert Quinn, which was a very under-the-radar acquisition. They trade for him. He actually had a pretty decent season for Miami. This is a guy that at a time was a top 10 pass rusher in the NFL, just kind of completely fell off the cliff, but did actually muster up one of his best years in Miami in a couple years. And he's a significant upgrade over what this team had on the edge last year. So you are upgrading that pass rush. And if he can repeat what he was in Miami, it's going to help this defense become, really, really even more difficult to deal with. But you do have some questions on if he can repeat that because he is getting older and has had a lot of inconsistencies in his career. And then the X factor here is Taco Charlton. What are you getting from him? First round pick in 2017. I thought it was a really bad pick at the time. That has really kind of proved to hold true. I just didn't see him having the upside of a number one edge rusher. He'll be this team's third edge rusher probably, He'll probably play in front of Robert Quinn a lot on first downs as a bigger run defender, but I'm just really not expecting a whole lot from Taco Charlton. Then you got Dorrance Armstrong. He was more of a developmental pick in the 4th round last year. We'll see what his development looks like this year. If he ended up being a better pass rusher than Taco Charlton and was kind of this team's replacement for Randy Gregory, who I don't see ever really coming back to this team ever. That would not surprise me if he kind of came in here and was a decent 3rd rotational edge guy to come in on nickel packages. Then you got Joe Jackson, a 5th round pick. Good value there out of Miami in the 5th round. He'll kind of rotate, I think, with Taco Charlton as a rookie, as that kind of early down edge player, a little bit of a bigger body. He's going to take some relief off of Robert Quinn and allow Robert Quinn to really be that, focused 3rd down edge rusher, keep his stamina up, and really just get after the quarterback and not worry too much about the run defense. I do have some questions on where you're getting the pass rush on the interior, because I love that edge duo. And, frankly, with Robert Quinn healthy and playing like he did last year, it is a top 5 edge rush duo. But on the interior, the 2 guys that I think will be the best pass rushers here on the inside will be Tyron Crawford, Malik Collins. You could do worse there. Crawford's a nice, 3-tech. Collins is a really powerful bull rush type of guy. There's some energy and explosiveness to deal with from those guys, but neither of them are really in any kind of, dominant X factor conversation. Tristan Hill's a 2nd round pick out of UCF. To me, I look at him as their Malik Collins replacement. He is an uber explosive athlete, but he's very much like Malik Collins. There's a reason we didn't mention Collins in the run defense segment, because he is very undisciplined, is effectively a full steam ahead power rusher, and that has a lot of value in the NFL, but he's not really a 3-down run defender. Now, Tristan Hill, a young player, could certainly develop a little more patience and discipline as a 3-down defender, but entering the NFL as a rookie, I do see as a little more of a raw guy, and someone I don't necessarily think is going to play a whole lot as a rookie, assuming Malik Collins can stay healthy. Now, Crawford, I'm sorry, but I know he got hurt at the end of last season. It seems he's good to go, but it was kind of a scary neck injury, so hopefully he can stay healthy here. I did need to mention that there. And then you also have Daniel Ross, Kerry Hyder. They can get after the quarterback a little bit. Nothing I'm really relying on, but you got to throw their name into the ring. So you got a bunch of names here. I love the edge duo. It's a solid pass rush, just like we saw last year. Top 10 pass rush. I don't know if it has the upside of a top 5 pass rush, just because I don't know if you're ever getting that dominant interior presence from any of these guys, barring just me being completely off on Tristan Hill. But again, 9th for the pass rush is very good. And then probably the thing that sets this defense apart is this linebacker duo and really trio with Sean Lee here as well. Not that really matters, because in 2019, these teams are just running nickel packages all the time. You only got 2 linebackers are starters nowadays. But Leighton Vander Esch, fantastic 1st round pick. He was really one of my 5 bad calls. I had a 2nd round grade on him. I didn't see him making this impact as a rookie. He was just a dominant rookie defender. Obviously can play the run at that size. He's big, 250 plus pounds, great. But with that length and his athletic ability, he looks a lot like Brian Urlacher out there, who was also about as lengthy and instinctive in coverage as Vander Esch. So he projects as someone in his 2nd year that could emerge as a top 5 linebacker in the NFL. And then Jalen Smith played like a top 5 linebacker last year as well. Someone that fell into the 2nd round that pretty much everyone that followed the draft wanted their team to take because of the ridiculous upside for him to be, a Ray Lewis type of middle linebacker. That's what he looked like at Notre Dame, but suffered just a gruesome injury. And he looks, 95% of what he was, if not 100%. He is just ridiculously athletic, not afraid to hit, great coverage skills. This linebacker duo, we rank it 3rd just because Wagner and Kuechly are so good and have done it for so many years. But, if Jalen Smith repeats what he did last year and Vander Esch even takes a small step forward, it's number 1, and it's really not even close, because these guys can be in that same conversation, before long, like with Kuechly and Wagner. Both of these guys can get into that conversation because they're both that good. And, this is kind of the team that we point to when we make the argument that linebackers are underpaid in the modern NFL. Because you watch what this team was able to do against the New Orleans Saints, and that is the blueprint for me for why I make that case that athletic sideline-to-sideline linebackers in the modern game are just, such a great impact. The Saints, say what you want about Drew Brees, fantastic player, first ballot Hall of Famer, all that. He's not exactly a deep ball quarterback at this point. A lot of their offense, I'm sorry, Saints fans, is predicated on quick hitting passes and screens and kind of misdirection and a lot of stuff that can dupe a lot of linebackers. Well, the Cowboys weren't having any of that, and they just dominated that game. And I think we are going to see this defense dominate a lot of quarterbacks that don't have that super vertical element to their offense. And then you still have Sean Lee hanging around here. Maybe he's just more of a coach at this point, but, if health is his issue, well, him playing 150 snaps during the season is a pretty good way for him to stay healthy. If this team's going to go base and Sean Lee can still play, God, I can't even imagine how good that linebacker trio could look on base looks. Now, he's going to come off the field for a lot of time this year, and I do think he only plays about 150 snaps this year. But you obviously love what you have there in terms of depth. After them, you got Chris Covington, a 6th-round pick last year. Justin March-Lillard, he's more of just a special teamer. Joe Thomas, I don't know if he'll make this team. They do have Jalen Jelks being listed currently on Our Lads as an off-ball. Now, they gave him number 74. He'll be edge depth, and I kind of forgot to mention him. I'm not a big Jalen Jelks fan. He's just very lengthy, and I don't know if he's going to stick. I don't know if he has the pass rushing skill set as a speed rusher to be an impact here in the NFL. We'll see about that. But yeah, 3rd for linebacker, certainly has the upside to be number 1, and you love what this linebacker room brings to this defense. Now, the only thing that is going to be a question mark here is going to be the secondary. It's not that it's bad secondary, don't get me wrong. Byron Jones played like one of the best corners in the NFL last year. We'll see if he can repeat that. He's going to be pretty low on the pecking order in terms of who needs to be paid here, and I'm going to throw in a bonus little feature here in this episode and rank all of the players that are coming up on contract in terms of what order I would pay these guys in. I think that's an interesting conversation to have about this Cowboys team, but I do project him to play like a top 12-ish corner next year. You love what you have in him. Cowboys fans will tell me I'm too low on him, and maybe I am. But if he does repeat what he did last year, he will get into that top 5 to 7 conversation for me. I just want to see it one more year after converting from safety, where he really was not very good. But things are definitely looking pretty promising for Byron Jones' career, who is just a freak athlete. And then the other guys, it's not a weakness. I like Chidobe Awuzie. He was on my list of breakout players for last year. He didn't really do that. He's fine. He's a starting caliber player, but I thought he was going to get into, more of a Josh Norman type of conversation as a really dominant number 2 corner and a guy that could be your best corner if you needed to lean on him. He might lack the elite quickness and speed to be a true number 1 man-to-man guy, but as a number 2, I thought he was going to have a better year than he did last year. Not a bad player by any means, and maybe he takes that step up here in his 3rd year, which is something we've seen from corners in the past, but that is a projection. And then in the nickel, you've got really good players, Anthony Brown and Jordan Lewis. Now, I was a little confused why Jordan Lewis wasn't getting more playing time. I thought he looked pretty good when he was out there. I don't know if it's a locker room thing with him, which was a little bit of a concern coming out of college, I believe. Anthony Brown, a very athletic player and by no means a bad nickel corner, but I just love Jordan Lewis's instincts, ball skills in that nickel position. But these two are going to compete, and I don't know if it's going to make a huge difference who wins that job. Either way, you get some fantastic depth with one of those guys as your 4th corner. Then you've got Michael Jackson, a 5th-round pick this year. I don't see him being very good as a rookie. He's got a little bit of an upside, but not expecting much there. They also have C.J. Goodwin as veteran depth. And then at safety, it's not the best. I like Xavier Woods. He's a starting caliber safety. He's, I don't know, top 20 free safety. He's fine. Maybe he takes a step up in his 3rd season. He's a good athlete. I do like him. You got some questions at strong safety. Jeff Heath is fine. I don't know if I would ever really want him starting. He's probably the biggest weakness to me on this defense. They did bring in George Iloka to compete. I don't know what he really has left at this point. He could not get on the field there in Minnesota, which was surprising because he had so much success in that Mike Zimmer scheme in Cincinnati. So he'll compete with Jeff Heath. I think Jeff Heath will probably just win it out. So you could do worse. Both those guys have started games. They're not necessarily a liability. I just don't consider either of those guys a strength at strong safety. Then you got Kayvon Frazier, a 6th-round pick in 2016. Not expecting much there. Darian Thompson, Jamel Showers, Donovan Wilson, a 6th-round pick. Safety is fine. It's not necessarily a strength of this team. Neither is corner other than Byron Jones. But you don't really have any tremendous weaknesses there either. So the Cowboys defense for me comes in tied for 5th. So I do project this defense to be very good next year. Maybe even a slight step up from where they were last year. And, outside of having a really well-rounded elite secondary, they shape up to be even better than they were last year. I like the defensive coaching and culture as well. Rod Marinelli, really solid defense coordinator, did a good job with this team last year. They're going to come in tied for 12th in terms of the culture. So before we move on and talk about the schedule, I am actually going to look towards the future very briefly here with this team. We've mentioned how this roster is all very well put together right now, but it is going to fall apart. And they're going to have some really just difficult decisions to make here. So we're going to rank Dak Prescott, Zeke Elliott, Amari Cooper, La'el Collins, Jalen Smith, and Byron Jones. Obviously, all players that we spent a lot of time talking about as pivotal points of this team. All of those contracts will be up after this season. So as we sit here today, Dak Prescott's got to be priority number one. I just, this team, even if you lose one or two of these guys, you're not in a position to just let your quarterback go and figure something else out. I would pay Dak Prescott. I'd maybe franchise tag him, but at this point, that franchise tag number is probably even more than what you're going to have to pay him. Hopefully Dak Prescott can understand that he's a very good quarterback, but he shouldn't be getting the same money that Aaron Rodgers just got. That's just wrong. So hopefully you can get Dak Prescott at $30 million, maybe take a step back next year, but in a year or two that becomes a little more team friendly as the cap rises. But you got to get Dak Prescott. Then to me it's Amari Cooper. Fantastic chemistry with Dak Prescott. Important position. He's only 24 years old. You gave up a 1st-round pick for him. Those two absolutely have got to get done. Then after that, I would pay Jalen Smith. We talked about what he can do for this offense, the upside he brings. That's assuming he can repeat what he did last year. Now, you do have Leighton Vander Esch for a long time here on a cheap contract, but I love the duo of those two. Just to have them on both sides of the field, it really is a game changer if you can have two of those guys as opposed to just one, in my opinion. And we'll see what Bobby Wagner ends up getting paid here. The Cowboys front office, this isn't really getting discussed, is, they're really going to keep an eye on Bobby Wagner. If he really raises the bar there and says, hey, I am just way better than CJ Mosley, who just got $16 million, right? If he makes a case that he's a defensive MVP caliber player and that he should make over $20 million like some of these other defensive players, that's bad news for Dallas, because Jalen Smith, if he repeats that performance, is going to have a good case to actually get paid more than whatever Bobby Wagner gets. And that would really hurt this team's ability to get these next guys back that we got to talk about. After that, assuming Byron Jones repeats, I would pay Byron Jones. At this point, I don't think I'm expecting Chidobe Awuzie to emerge as a number one corner. That cornerback position is incredibly difficult to find, and he can really be a pivot point for this defense as this team's number one corner. And then we get to Ezekiel Elliott. Hot take here, I'm not paying Ezekiel Elliott. I'm running him into the ground and letting him go. He's got a 5th-year option, actually, after this season, so you can get 2 more years of Zeke here. I am just going to run him into the ground. It sounds terrible. I usually am a little more pro-organization, but he's had the off-field issues here. He has done greatness for this team, but I can't pay Dak Prescott $30 million and then pay my running back $16 million. I just can't do it. Cowboys fans aren't going to like it, but if I was the general manager of the Dallas Cowboys, Cowboys fans, you would not be seeing Ezekiel Elliott retire as a Dallas Cowboy. Running back is just too replaceable. This team has way too much talent and too many players to keep outside of Ezekiel Elliott. I would actually, assuming La'el Collins can play well at right tackle, which he did last year, again next year, which is no guarantee. He's had his inconsistencies. I would actually pay him well before I paid Ezekiel Elliott. So that was a fun little segment, a little unique to the Cowboys here. It's an interesting conversation, but let's now look at the schedule and what I think about this team. So their over-under is 9 wins, and I am going to go over on the Dallas Cowboys. So, you can look at the schedule, form your own opinions. I'm actually going to save a little time, not go through game by game here. Sitting here in July and predicting game by game, while it's fun to do, it's more about just saying, what their final record's going to be. I've got them going 8-0 at home. That's probably not how it's going to play out. Vegas gives the home team 3 points. It's just easier to predict you to win the home games. They could, go into New Orleans and win. We talked about how they match up very well with that team. But then Aaron Rodgers could come into town the next week and beat this team like we've seen in the past. So, I've got them going 10-6. I think it's a good range for them. They do, to me, still have just a little bit of a limited upside with Dak Prescott. But like we said at the beginning of the video, it's not about if this team can make the playoffs, because the schedule's fine. There's nothing really too difficult or too easy about it. This is a good team. They're going to be able to win around this 10-game range. We've got them at 8-11 and going over 9. But to become a Super Bowl team here, you really do need this defense to be not just the top 5 defense that it was last year. It has got to be, that Denver defense in 2015 or the Legion of Boom defense. Because while I like this offense, I just don't know if it's ever going to be a championship caliber offense with Dak Prescott. And that's fine, because you have the pieces on defense this year to get it done. They are 22-1 to win the Super Bowl. And I do think that defense has the potential to do it. If Robert Quinn can be, kind of like what DeMarcus Ware was for that Broncos team and be that kind of jump start on the opposite side of the pass rush, that could contribute to a breakout for like Chidobe Awuzie. Get better play from, say, Xavier Woods at free safety. It doesn't take a whole lot for this Cowboys team to get into the elite, all-time great defense category. But it's got to be this year, and they have got to stay healthy. But if you are a Cowboys truther and you think they have a chance, I'm not going to tell you not to bet on this team at 22-1 to win the Super Bowl, because that has been the model over the last few years, is to put together a ridiculous roster, have a quarterback on a ridiculously cheap contract, unless you're the Patriots, obviously, and then go get it done. So I do think if this team stays healthy, they could be a Super Bowl contender. I rank them 13th, which might sound low for that, but there's a lot of good teams in the NFL. As far as the division odds at plus 130, that's another thing that does kind of get in this team's way, is I think the Philadelphia Eagles are a really, really freaking good football team, and as good as this roster is, I think the Eagles have an even better one. So just, the competition in this division with the Eagles, with the teams in the NFC, it does get a little tough, but it's going to be a very, very good football team next year. And if I was a Cowboys fan, I'd be pretty freaking excited, because this is going to be kind of their year and their window. As far as the future is concerned, I don't know. So that's going to do it. Cowboys fans, let me know your thoughts. Rest of the NFL fans, let me know as well. Again, please hit that like button. We'll see you in a couple days for another deep dive. Cheers as always. We'll see you next time.